All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to explore a truly fascinating dynamic: how India's ancient geology directly creates some of its most complex modern socioeconomic paradoxes. If you've ever wondered why some of the most resource rich lands on Earth struggle with profound developmental challenges, well, you are in the right place. To wrap our heads around these incredible contrasts, we'll be hopping across the map. We're going to cover the Peninsular Foundation, Meghalaya's wet desert, the curse of Chotanyapur, the discontinuous Eastern Ghats, the Western Ghats Great Divide, and finally, the clash of ecology versus development. Let's get to it. Starting off with Section 1, the Peninsular Foundation. This is literally the bedrock of the subcontinent. You know what's kind of surprising? But India actually isn't just one single monolithic rock. Far from it. It's really more of a giant geologic jigsaw puzzle. We're looking at a patchwork of four incredibly stable ancient land masses, all stitched together right along a massive rift valley. Geologists call these foundational puzzle pieces cratons. Basically, they're exposed batholiths, which means they represent some of the absolute oldest rocks in the Earth's lithosphere. They're incredibly stable, and honestly, they set the massive stage upon which the rest of our geographic and human story unfolds. Moving on up to the northeast, we hit Section 2, Meghalaya's wet desert paradox. So, picture this. Thanks to the unique triangular orientation and the incredibly steep southern slopes of the Garo, Khasi, and Jayantia hills, places like Cherrapunji and Mawson Ram get slammed with a staggering amount of rain. We are talking over 1,200 centimeters. That literally makes them the sites of the highest rainfall anywhere in the world. But here is where we hit our first massive paradox. You'd naturally assume an area with world record rainfall would be, lush and green year-round, right? Well, the reality is that the region is chronically drought-prone. Sounds crazy, but here's why. Massive, unchecked deforestation has stripped away the trees. Without those trees acting as natural mini check dams to store water and help it seep into the ground, all that insane volume of rainwater just violently washes away. So you end up with devastating flash floods during the wet season and then literally a drought when it's dry. And the real kicker here is the socioeconomic fallout. A severe lack of economic opportunities driven by this harsh geography forces local communities into some incredibly hazardous survival tactics. One of the most notorious is rat hole mining for coal. It's exactly as dangerous as it sounds for the miners. Plus, it severely pollutes the rivers, leaches heavy metals, and destabilizes the very slopes that are already causing the floods. It's just this vicious, inescapable cycle of poverty and environmental destruction. All right, traveling southwest brings us to Section 3, Chota Nagpur, and its notorious resource curse. Get this plateau was formed an incredible 3.56 billion years ago. Just let that time frame sink in for a second. Because of its deep geological age, it is the oldest shield of the entire Indian Peninsular Plateau, and it is spectacularly rich in metalliferous minerals. Now, normally in geology, igneous rocks don't hold fossils or fossil fuels, but thanks to a massive tectonic event known as the Damodar Faulting, huge reserves of biological matter were trapped and pressurized over eons. The result? This region holds massive coal and iron reserves right next to each other. It's a rare combination that literally fueled India's first industrial revolution. But here's the dark side of that coin. This immense mineral wealth directly creates a pipeline of poverty for the locals who've lived there for generations. The relentless drive to extract these resources leads to the large-scale displacement of tribal communities. These folks essentially become environmental refugees, ending up as marginal laborers in urban areas with no real footing. And that frustration, that marginalization, it ultimately fuels severe law and order problems, notably Naxalism. And in a cruel twist of irony, that unrest hampers any further equitable development in the region. Let's shift our gaze to the eastern edge now for Part 4, the discontinuous Eastern Ghats. When you compare India's two coastlines side by side, a huge contrast emerges. Over on the west, you have these continuous, massive, step-like formations. But the Eastern Ghats? Completely different story. They are ancient fold mountains formed 1.7 billion years ago. And over those eons, they've been severely dissected by major east-flowing rivers. That aggressive erosion has chewed them up, turning what used to be a solid mountain wall into a heavily broken, discontinuous set of residual hills. And nestled right within this broken terrain is another glaring example of the resource curse. The KBK region, that's Kalahandi, Bolangir, and Koraput, holds a whopping 75% of the country's precious, high-value bauxite. Yet, despite sitting on literally billions of dollars of raw aluminum ore, these are some of the absolute poorest districts in all of India. The wealth simply bypasses the local communities entirely. Swinging over to the opposite coast, we reach Part 5, the Western Ghats, also known as the Great Divide. The geology over here is incredibly dramatic. These mountains feature the Deccan Traps, which are massive shield volcanoes formed when the Indian plate drifted right over the Reunion hotspot millions of years ago. These superviolent eruptions created layer upon layer of basaltic rock that once covered a jaw-dropping 15 lakh square kilometers. That is a massive footprint. Because of their sheer height and that unbroken, continuous nature we mentioned earlier, the Western Ghats act as a perfect water divide. And this fundamentally rewrites how rivers behave on the subcontinent. East-flowing rivers have a long, gradual journey. They wash over huge areas, carry enormous amounts of sediment, and form massive fertile deltas that are great for agriculture. But the west-flowing rivers? They're short and swift. They plunge directly into the Arabian Sea through narrow estuaries without depositing sediments. This completely changes the coastal ecology and the human economies built around them. Finally, we arrive at our last section, Part 6, Ecology versus Development. This is where we see our final and maybe most pressing paradox. Down in the south, where these mountain ranges meet in the Nilgiri Hills, there's a deep, living human history. This region is home to some highly specialized, primitive tribes, groups like the Chola Naikar, the Todas, and the Kurumbas. Their ancestors are estimated to have arrived in India around 60,000 years ago. They are literally the original custodians of this land. But today, because of intense socioeconomic pressures and constantly encroaching development, these highly marginalized communities are hovering right on the verge of extinction. And it's not just the people who are at risk. The region's interconnected tiger reserves and national parks make up a lush, vibrant biodiversity hotspot that is currently under intense pressure. We're talking massive government infrastructure projects, like hydroelectric dams and high-tech observatories, being built smack in the middle of sensitive tiger corridors. Add to that the intensive plantation agriculture, growing cash crops like tea and rubber using heavy pesticides, which actively kills off the soil's natural biology. Even worse, it shrinks the vital catchment areas that serve as the lifeline for almost all of southern India's major rivers. Which brings us to the ultimate paradox. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a crucial thought to chew on. We've just seen how billions of years of geology have gifted immense wealth, but simultaneously laid the groundwork for extreme inequality and environmental strain. So, how exactly can a rapidly developing nation balance its desperate need to harvest natural resources for economic growth with the absolute necessity of preserving its most ancient, life-giving landscapes and the indigenous peoples who call them home? It really is the defining geographic question of our modern age. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and remember to always keep questioning the ground beneath your feet.